Being female helped because most, if not all my cousins, the male ones, when they get to high school, they would do high school in the evening so that they had a full-time job. When I came to the United States for the first time, I probably had like 70 people who took me to the airport. I have this huge picture. So I'm someone that at any given day, I did not know the value of the stock, Qualcomm or IBM at all. And I could see that my colleagues all knew. Okay. And of course I want to do better for the company, but this, overwhelming goal to make it perform better on the market was not something driving me. So the minority tax is hard, and I think that it's a little harder in the academia.
Welcome to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, where we talk to computer scientists who immigrated from their home countries for study or for work or for other reasons. In these oral history interviews, you will find established and renowned computer scientists from across academia and industry narrating their experiences of immigrating from where they grew up to a completely different land, often the US. My name is Indi Gupta, and I'm your host. I'm delighted to welcome Dilma da Silva to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast. Dilma da Silva is a professor at the Texas A&M University, where she has been since 2014 in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering. She was also head of the Computer Science and Engineering Department at Texas A&M from 2014 to 2019. Currently, she holds the Ford Motor Company Design Professorship and leads the Texas A&M Cybersecurity Center. She served as the Associate Dean for Faculty Success at the College of Engineering at Texas A&M from 2019 to 2020. Her work is on research in operating systems, distributed systems, and cybersecurity. She's an ACM Distinguished Scientist. Her work has won a lot of laurels, including the Best Paper Award at FAST, that's the Unix File and Storage Technologies Conference. And previously, when she was at IBM, her work has won the Pat Goldberg Best Paper Award at IBM. She does a lot of outreach work. She's chair of the ACM SIGOPS CARES Committee since October 2020, which is focused on discrimination and harassment policy violations in the computing community. She's a member of the Computing Research Association Widening Participation, also known as CRAWP board, since 2008. And she's one of the founding leaders of the Latinas in Computing group since 2007. As I mentioned earlier, Dilma da Silva has been with Texas A&M since 2014. Before that, she was at IBM Research TJ Watson Center from 2000 to around 2012, where she worked on smart clouds, operating systems, and exascale systems. And before that, she was faculty at University of Sao Paulo in Brazil from 1995 to 2000. And then before that, she did her PhD from Georgia Tech from 1990 to 1997. And yet before that, she did her BSc and MSc from University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, BSc in 1987 and MSc in 1990. Welcome to the podcast, Dilma.
Hey, hi, very nice to be here. And I already noticed that I forgot to include in my bio that I did work for Qualcomm Research in Silicon Valley. So I spent 2 years there, which I learned a lot about how people breathe and pursue innovation in Silicon Valley. So I forgot to include that, I guess. Thank you.
So you went to middle and high school in Brazil in the 1970s and 1980s, maybe a sliver of the 1960s. Your background is very unique in that, as you shared with me earlier, you are a first-generation middle and high school student, meaning your parents did not study far in school. Tell us a bit about that, and also tell us a bit about what made you come so far in your academic and education journey.
Yeah, I was very fortunate to come from a very large family. So my father had 10 siblings, my mom 12, then many, many kids. And I was surrounded by very smart people who just thought that they didn't like school. So the ones that were from the older generation did not have any choice. They just couldn't go to school. And the younger generation was figuring it out. It was and not very interested on it. But I was lucky that I found school was much better than doing housework. In the traditional way, the family still saw that females should be prepared to marry and have large families. And in between doing housework and doing schoolwork, there is no comparison for me. And I was lucky that my parents did see education as the way of improving. They realized that they had challenges that if they had been educated would be much easier. So I like to joke that I was 9 or 10 and much ahead of all of you guys because I was doing all the banking for all my uncles and, doing when they want a loan, I'll be the one filling it up, all the forms and, not very different, I imagine, from other kids when they immigrate to a new country. In our case, we're just in the same country, but with different, backgrounds. So I really liked math in school, and that was a fun way of spending my childhood. We didn't have books at home, but as soon as I could take the bus by myself and go to the public library, then it's an equalizer, right? So I could have access to all the books I wanted. And so there is this feedback loop that happens to all of us. When people tell you that you're good on something, then you like doing it. So I really liked being good in school. I was not good in sports, unfortunately. I could not sing, but I was really good in school, and I pursued that. When I got to the university and I saw that people could be paid to study and they would get to travel, so I saw how faculty lived, then I was very sure that I wanted to go to graduate school and get all the required diplomas in order to have a faculty life.
So you mentioned that your parents and of course the generations before, it was not very common to go to school. Was that because the schooling system in Brazil was not mature, or what was the reason there? Or was it just a family?
So they lived in a part of the country that is today 4 or 5 hours by car from the coast. So it's very rural, and electricity only got to that area, I think, around 95. So you can imagine how it was on when they were growing up. So you really had to work on you would do enough to learn how to do for operations and be able to read a little bit and sign your name, and you would go to work in the field. Agriculture in order to be able to eat. So that was the constraint. They migrated towards the large cities. So my father went very young when he was 16 to Sao Paulo, and there he was an entrepreneur, right? Trying to get his act together to be able to have what would call in the United States a bodega in New York City, that kind of little stores. And so, so they didn't have access and they didn't know if they would be good at it. I think that's another thing. When you do very little with this teacher that they bring to this rural area, and the teacher, doesn't have a way of training them. My father also thought that he was bad at school. That was another thing, that he didn't get to go, but I don't care because it wouldn't be fun anyway. But they did realize that medical doctors and lawyers and engineers had better lives. They realized that.
And your parents were encouraging of you going to school and studying?
Yes, they were encouraging. In that sense, being female helped because most, if not all my cousins, the male ones, when they get to high school, they would do high school in the evening. So that they had a full-time job. So that was really very common. And it was exactly all my male cousins older than me had gone through that. And the female ones too. But when I wanted to do good education and study, my high school in the morning. My parents were fine with it, in the spirit that I don't have to already have a job and get prepared to be able to have my own family. I could wait for Prince Charming to come and give me the house. So it was an advantage to be a female and do not have the expectation that I should be contributing to the sustenance of the family.
What got you interested in science and math and STEM in general in high school? Or was it an organic thing?
I liked all subjects, but I was particularly good in math. And I did not know that my public high school was so weak. So I thought I was really good and I knew a lot of math. Then I learned that was not the case. In Brazil, you have, at the time, it was this entrance exam, written exam in all subjects, and that decides, based on your performance of the exam, if you get to the public university. The top universities at the time were all public. So that is no concern about paying the university, but you have to get in. And what happened is that I was a good student in my school, so a company who did preparatory courses to take people. So they went to the principal. They chose, a couple of students that they tutored me on everything I didn't know because I didn't see in my public school. So I'll go to high school in the morning, my third year, and spend the rest of the day being tutored full time, very intense, in order to be able to do the entrance exam. And once I succeeded, they would then claim my name as one of the people that they put it in there. And that was for free, that I got it, and it worked. So I'm very grateful that they tutored me on all these things I haven't seen. Of course, once I got to the university, and in Brazil at the time, because of the entrance exams, you had very well prepared students. I'm sure it's still the case. So I realized that, yes, I was super smart and the best student ever in a public school, but I did not have the preparation as but that's, I guess, all of us meet that situation at some point. Some of us meet that in graduate school, that we thought we were so prepared and we were not. I had that on the transition to the university.
The entrance exam to the university, is that a national level entrance exam to all of the universities or the major ones?
No, at the time you had to do for each university you want. There are not that many at the time. So in my case, I just did one, University of São Paulo, which we believe to be the best university in South America. And I just applied to that one. If it didn't succeed, I will then go a full year of those preparatory exams and probably be a little broader on my search. There are a couple of other very good universities in the state of São Paulo I could have applied, and I would in future years. History, math, geography, chemistry, physics, everything.
I see. Okay. So it's all the subjects in there. And it's just the exam, or do they also take school grades into account?
Not at all at the time. No background. Just there is one multiple choice first exam that will, from let's say 100,000 people who are applying, then 30,000 goes to the next phase for the whole university, and that phase is written exam on all the subjects, and they were graded, and that's it. It was when you leave that, then I felt that I felt my parents certainly were very proud of me for doing that. I consider applying to medical school, which in Brazil is you get to medical school and you do for many years, but you do as an undergrad, because they would be so happy to have a daughter who was a doctor. It would be really so. I was very tempted, but I really liked math. So I went to math, and they were probably a little disappointed. They thought I was going to be teaching math in middle school or high school, because they didn't really understand at the time that you could have a researcher as a career as a researcher either. And I was not very aware either. So I learned once I got to the university what you do and what university is.
Were there other girls or women with you in middle school and high school who were similarly interested in science and math?
No. And I think from my whole high school with thousands of people wouldn't even apply to that university. It's yes, it was not in something in my neighborhood that people were aspiring to. I didn't even know. And I think there was one more person, two people from, we were three who got into the university in different majors. Yeah, but at the time, computer science had a lot of females. So this is, as we remember here in the United States, that in the beginning, you had a lot of people in computer science that were coming from math and many females. So my class at the time was like that, many females. But even before I graduated, then we were already to 10% female. It was the transformation as computing conquered our imaginations, and we thought was really cool. Somehow it also seem less appealing to women.
When did you use your first computer?
So we did only have a mainframe, a Boros, where I remember we started with Algol and Fortran and those
things. This is in university?
At the university, I only saw my first personal computer and was able to touch it on an internship in 85. It was an Apple machine, and I was trying to do a database on it. I remember, but I didn't own my personal computer. I guess only at the end of graduate school. Yeah, so it were different times. We'll go to the university to do the work.
What was your first programming language that you learned?
Yeah, we did Algol, and then that was the first one, and then Pascal, and then a little bit of COBOL, but not that much, and a lot of Fortran. I only did C as a senior in my undergrad, and then I learned C++ just after that, because I decided to do my master's in object-oriented programming. So I learned Smalltalk, Simula, and C++, and that's.
Were there elements of the middle and high school education that you think prepared you well for your career as a computer scientist?
I really think was critical reading. I had some very good teachers in terms of literature, and I do think that they helped me to cultivate this idea of reading widely, and I do think that helps me to this day. I do believe that the idea of reading things and fast understanding, being able to translate into others, really helped. That was the number one. And math, I think that then I credit the university, where I really had very rigorous computer science degree that was very focused in theory at the time, because most of the professors had come from Europe and University of Waterloo, and they really were experts in the theoretical aspects of computer science. And that rigor really helped. I'm not in theory, of course, but I do think that being able to clearly separate what are the assumptions that you're taking in your work, and every step, which conclusion, your logical conclusion. It sounds all basic, but I do see, as I review papers, both of us are very active in reviewing papers for our community. I also see that maybe the writing or maybe the thinking that people could have spent more time in their growth, thinking about very systematic approaches to computing.
This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Dilma da Silva, Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. So you finished your BSc from University of Sao Paulo in 87, and then you stayed there for another 3 more years to do your MSc. Did you get interested in research while you were in the bachelor's program, or what point of time?
I was interested. I did some what we would call undergraduate research here. But I did in compilers, and then I decided to do a master. At that point, I had decided I wanted to be a professor, so I had to do a master's and then a PhD. And the PhD at the time abroad, because there were no PhDs in computer science at that time. And therefore, I had to do a master's, and the master's, because we didn't have a PhD program, the department had a very rigorous master's. So it was 3 years was on the fast track, and I had a nice thesis. Interesting, that because my master thesis was the first text in Portuguese about object-oriented programming, it was really funny that I had this, long waiting lists for my thesis. I wish I had documented that, taking pictures or something, so that I could really brag about. I'm bragging anyway, but I meant I would prove. But it was fun. I was like, oh gosh, this may be the work that a lot of people are reading. And I wanted to do systems and operating systems, which I couldn't do at the time. There were no one to advise. So then I looked for a graduate program where I could do it.
First thesis on object-oriented written in Portuguese.
Yeah, first document. Yes, just first so document. There was the books were not translated yet, right? So that was that was interesting. Then soon enough, books were translated. The books in the C++ language and books in general.
You mentioned earlier that you already wanted to become a professor while you're doing your bachelor's and master's. Was there a role model or was there a reason you wanted to become a professor?
No, I think it was the role model of all the faculty. I saw them like not really having a job. So in my family, people worked very hard, but it was a job. No complaining, but it was a job that they had no control. They had to do every day. I think my father did not have a day off. He started having day offs in his late 50s to take Sunday off. But until then, it was only Christmas. It was the day he took off. So when you go, and I could see that people really enjoyed their work. And they got to travel. At that time, I thought travel, abroad would be just such an amazing thing. I thought this would be really fun. And teaching, of course. I really had this appreciation for everything I learned. We faculty are not very good in showcasing the marvelous things of our day to day. We tend to talk to each other and to our students about, all the things that we had to do on the weekend because we're late, the proposals, the reviewers. And somehow the faculty who were teaching me, they did convey that they were really grateful for that career that they had. And it was not monetary, very smart at the time. As a public servant, professors were paid very poorly. I'm sure today it's still not well. So even though, of course, in the United States, a professor in computer science, any one of us could go to industry and get a very considerable increase in our salaries, we still stay doing what we want. But I don't think we communicate that. So if I have the soapbox here, just to say, yes, we can be happy in industry, we can be happy in academia, but the academia job is particularly fun.
Your parents were supportive of you in your quest to become a professor, to be an academic?
It's maybe a little embarrassing that I never discussed with them. I did not tell them I was applying for scholarships to study abroad. I did not tell them when I did send applications. My strategy was not very smart. I sent applications to the top 10 departments in computer science and only them. And no one took me, which today we joke that how did I manage to do that? Because I had a full scholarship. I was female. My GRE in computer science was like the high, like the 99. And so I probably did very poorly in conveying. I certainly didn't tell them that I had a full scholarship secured. Otherwise, I think one of those 10 schools would have taken me. But then I asked for help. And then on my second, I also, people explained to me that any top third institution in the United States department is amazing. And in top 50, actually, you can have a very good PhD program. So I did go on I moved to applying to the top 20. And then I got many, many offers, but without telling my parents. I only told them when everything was okay. And then I said, I am going to move to the United States. And if I don't like it, I'll come back. At that time, this little history here. we had a Brazilian president who decided that the way of handling inflation was that anyone with more than, at the time, 50,000 cruzeiros, I guess was the, whatever it was the name of our currency at that time, more than 50,000 of that currency, they would save your money for yourself, right? So they would take that, and it was not a lot of money that you could keep. So they were taking money out of the market to do that. And of course, later on, we all learned that that the rich and well-connected, they learned enough of that before, so they took their money out and transformed it in dollars or whatever. And then when there was no money, they could buy apartments and everything very, very cheap because people needed cash. But anyway, so any money that me and my parents had saved, it was now being taken care of by the government. And therefore, there was this complication that worried my family that I would be coming here without no more than, $300 cash. But a full scholarship that we hoped that the Brazilian government would honor. And of course they did, and I'm very grateful. So that was an interesting thing. I didn't realize, I guess I didn't know enough to worry about it. But, so that's when I told them I didn't want to worry them about all of this. And as you may recall yourself, at the time, the minute on a phone call was $3 a minute. So it was a Sunday a minute. Everything is well. I'm alive. I'll send letters. And it was super cute that when I came to the United States for the first time, I probably had like 70 people who took me to the airport. I have this huge picture. I joke that these days I go a lot to see family. They open the door of the car and I have to jump. No one cares me about taking me to the airport or picking me up. But it was very sweet for my family who never had anyone who ventured out of the country at the time. So for all of them was really, exciting.
The entire family supported you and supported you.
Everyone was yes. So that was, so that was, they were very, concerned how you're going to live by yourself. It's, many of us come from countries where the community, the sense of being with family is, very important. The idea that you will have dinner by yourself day after day or something like that was, worrisome, for them.
So Brazil was ruled by the military from 1964 to 1980s, and then had a kind of an unstable economy in the 1990s as well.
Yes.
Did that have an impact on your education or as you were growing up?
So I do think that somehow my father, with his business of selling alcohol and cigarettes, were resilient. People still drank and people still bought cigarettes, and he managed to not suffer as other parts of the economy. So, for example, he was not afraid of losing his job because he was, taking care of his own. So in that sense, in the sense of having money to take the bus to school, I still lived with them. And buying my books, they were all very generous and were able to really do, what I needed. Not like my classmates who may go to Europe on, for summer or something, but being able to do that. In terms of the university was starved of resources in many different ways, but the funding comes from what will be our sale tax. And so as long as there was people buying and selling, the funding was still coming to the university enough to pay salaries. No big investment on networking or computers, but I don't think that was detrimental at the time. And there was also kudos for the research agency in São Paulo. The state of São Paulo has a research agency that the income also comes from sales tax. And they were always being very good at managing their money so that they were more resilient. So many, the faculty were still able to, have undergraduate researchers, and then themselves could take sabbaticals, and that agents would support their sabbaticals. So they were really continue to interact with top researchers abroad, which before the internet was really important. You really had to come and spend time with people, because otherwise you have to, wait until papers were published and your library got the conference proceedings or the journals. So that was very much slower. The government had this program to have PhDs in computer science, in science in general. And if you're qualified and you're going to a top university, they had funding for that. So that was good at the time.
When the government paid for your PhD, were there strings attached, like you have to come back and spend a few?
No, I'm so old that there were none. There's a very interesting thing. Of course, these days they do J1 visas, but no, I came on an F1 visa. I never signed anything I was going to come back. And because I graduated in a time of a big .com, many of the other people who came at the same time decided not to go back to Brazil. And I totally understand, because you wanted to do top research and innovation and work at Silicon Valley. You had to stay here. I chose to go back. So I chose to go back, and I stayed there. Some people decided just to ignore. Some people actually decide to pay the money back, even though they were not obligated. So you had all those things. And I decided to go back. And I'm glad I did. It did not, I don't think that my career would have been differently if I had those 4 or 5 years already. If I had gone directly to assistant professor or gone directly to a research lab, I'm not sure that I would be that different. So I went back to Brazil, and I stayed there for a few years. And then I thought, wow, I never really did an internship or industry. I just didn't during my PhD, because I had my scholarship. I didn't think it was appropriate to receive from the government and to receive from a company, which now I think I was being very short-minded, because it would have gone good for the country if I had done that, if I expanded my knowledge by going to a company. But I didn't. So then I said, I will get a leave of absence of 2 years, and I will just work in a company. So then I just applied from Brazil in a very silly way. I applied through the internet. I did not call the dozens of people that I knew in all the labs. I just decided to apply on a job postings on the internet, and which I say
around the year 2000 or so.
Yeah. So what happened is that a lot of talent was leaving. That is 99. They were leaving the research labs, all of them, in going and founding startups. So the research labs were actually looking at the applications coming through the internet. This is crazy. I thought, why did I do that? And after I did get an interview offer, then I talked to the many of people from my network that I knew they were in those companies, in order to better prepare for the interview, and also to understand what should I pay attention to. And but I came back to the United States, to IBM Research, thinking I was going to stay a couple of years and go back to Brazil. And I thought I was going to really miss the teaching. And interesting, I love teaching, but I did not miss the teaching. I think I was still so involved in giving presentations. I become this go-to person that if a senior VP, like, what is this Zen and KVM virtualization thing? Can someone give me a 15-minute presentation? And I really enjoyed doing those kinds. So I guess I was just teaching different people without having to grade anyone. So I didn't miss that. And the jobs were interesting. So I did release my position at the university so that they could hire someone else, and stayed longer.
You came to the US in 1990 to do your PhD, just to put some years on the timeline. Yeah. So that was at Georgia Tech, and then you finished your PhD at Georgia Tech in 1997. In parallel, your CV says that you were faculty at University of Sao Paulo from 1995 to 2000. The time as your faculty overlapped with the time as your PhD student?
Right. So the scholarship is a 4-year, and of course my advisor would be delighted to fund me for the 5th year that I needed to finish. But that was not feasible. You really had to go back to the country because of I had a position at the university secured all the time. And not only secured, they were paying me a small stipend to help me. So I did want to go back to the university. My time off was limited. So I did go, and then I would, I was just finishing up writing papers. My advisor said you have to have 3 strong journal submissions. That's the time that before graduating. So I was finishing the things, and I would come to the United States. The advisor would support me anytime that I wanted to spend 3 months on the summer, or even I think I spent a semester where I didn't teach and came and as a research assistant. So there was this time that I was doing both, but I would say that I was just finishing up the papers. I had the results. It was just a matter. And the 97 degree is also false in the following sense. I had a person in my committee from a research lab. And the person, flew to Georgia Tech, attended my defense, and then they need to sign. They never, ever would reply to emails. So I had to I registered. So I was still in the university, but I was not anymore. It's just I couldn't graduate without that signature. Finally, I found the phone of the secretary of this person. I told my story. I'm back in Brazil. I'm paying my tuition myself, and this is my salary in dollars. This is how much I'm paying. If there is any change, I'll be happy to do. I just don't hear anything back. And then in 15 minutes, I got the signature. So I should have. Later on, I confronted this member of our community, and I joked that he needs to pay me back those dollars. But anyway, and a reminder for all of us: we do ignore email. So I totally could see, unfortunately, India, I could see myself doing the same. So I was not even at the time angry, but it's not too bad. Looks like I'm younger because I should have the PhD from early 96, and that story took a year. That's okay. So I have a fresher PhD.
Yeah, reaching people was kind of hard back then, given that email was just coming online, and of course we didn't have Twitter, Facebook, Slack, and any of these.
No web page to find a phone number for the person. There's no way. That was very frustrating to try to find. So I actually kind of called the research lab and tried to find not the person, but an assistant. And the person had an assistant, which is unusual. You need often in a company, you need to have a director level. So I guess the person had a director level.
You're listening to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Dilma da Silva, Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. Going back a little bit in time, so it's 1990 and your entire family has come to see you off at the airport. You board the plane, you come to the US, and you spend your first few weeks and months here. What is that adaptation experience like? How was that transition like?
Well, first there is always the shock that my English is not, as proficient as we need, but that gets solved very, very fast. And I also found the classes very fast-paced. I think in Brazil we had a style where we start things, but the professor has not really decided on the projects. The first 2 weeks, there is never homework. It is different. And then at the time, Georgia Tech was on a quarter system. So what happened is that from the very first day, you have this huge homework and already projects, and was so fast-paced, that took me a while. The second adaptation was reading papers. I was educated to really understand everything that I was reading. So I started working with this professor who was my advisor, Carsten Schwann, in the end. And he would ask me to read, 5 papers for the next meeting, and I could only read one. And then I said, but I put the hours, but it's slow. And I think being European, he had been in European education. He just showed me, okay, show me your notes. And they're like, wow, you're going too deep on the paper. So that was this transition to learn how to read a paper, trying to capture what is the problem, how did it convince us that the motivation is good, and what is trying to do that is different from the before, and how is evaluating the success of the approach. And he trained me to kind of like, actually, it became from now on, you are going to read abstract, introduction, and evaluation and conclusion, and see what you can tell about the paper, trying to read on the diagonal as he was telling me. So that was a difference because of area. I'm sure that if I were doing graph theory, the way I was reading paper was appropriate, but not for systems. There are so many more papers, and actually sometimes the contribution is relevant, but it is one nugget. You just have to find that nugget. You don't have to go through the whole thing. So that's another adaptation. And I, would write a lot of letters, handwritten letters to family and to friends that went to pursue their PhD in Europe. That I had friends from Brazil that were pursuing a PhD in computer science in Europe. It was very weird for me that I would just stay in the lab very late and not to tell anyone. From moving that I always live with my family, and you have to tell where you are, otherwise they may be worried, something may have happened. So I was just like, I don't have anyone to tell that I'll be spending, being until 4 a.m. in the lab with a colleague. So yeah, that was, but we're really happy times, I think. And coursework, I know some people don't like, students, they start the PhD, they put too much time on the coursework. For me, it was a way of having proficiency and doing well on the coursework, and doing, like, starting to do quals and things like that. I was learning a lot about culture. I had a large number of lab mates from India, and from learning that my reading of their yes and no with their heads were often wrong, to learning about their families was really also interesting.
So you were a pretty social person. You built a big social group of friends.
I did. And I also, I got the book, Baseball for Dummies, so that I could also, at the time, the Atlanta Braves, the team, was having this resurgence. So in order to also connect better with my lab mates, or just classmates, there were domestic students, baseball worked very well. So I tried to, and I never fell in love with baseball. I like soccer, and soccer was my thing that I could connect to many, but not at the time to the Americans. So yeah, so I spent energy on connecting to people.
And of course, even back then, even in the U.S. universities, there was a gender disparity and relatively fewer women.
That's true. So as being social, I like to give parties, and then my Brazilian friends would say, but your parties don't have females. What kind of party? I don't want to go to that party. This is, Brazilians speaking. But it was true that whenever a female graduate student was arriving, we would connect. And I have friends to this day from that time. They were close friends because we were in different areas, but we were female. Yeah, there are not that many. Someone told me in my probably second semester that my advisor, the person that seemed to be going to be my advisor, was really good at advising women, and I just did not understand that. Like, what could be different? So I really didn't say anything. I didn't understand it until years later, where people would compare to some other faculty. Wonderful researchers, wonderful people that somehow didn't portray to be so comfortable with female students, and my advisor had a lot of female students, And honestly, looking back, something I didn't notice at the time, he also had many African American students. I didn't notice at the time because Atlanta is very racially diverse. So of course, but then now when I think about the other research groups, they didn't have as many. So somehow my advisor on his style, which was not personal, which was not cozy or anything like that, he made all of us very comfortable.
What there particular attributes in his advising style that you picked up that enabled him to advise women and African American students well?
I do think that he was really good at giving students time, although he had a very large group. By the time he passed away on 61, as he was 61 when he passed away, he had graduated 75 PhD students at the time, with many still on the pipeline. So he was productive with so many people. You would think that it would be one PhD student guiding another. And somehow he was very organized. He gave us individual time to all of us. So many, there was this equalizer that I'm not sure how he managed to do it, but he would have more time if you were like third or fourth year, then you have a full hour once a week, but even from the beginning, and that was true all, I think. And he was not personal. I think I never had any real personal discussion with him or about anything until I had graduated. He kept things very professional. And you would think that, for me, because I like to connect with people, that seemed really strange, but actually maybe that does help. And he did that with all the students the same. It was not his style to have any chit chat or anything. I remember, because he was originally from Germany, when there was the 94 World Cup that was happening in the United States, and we are all so excited. He's European. Then I asked him about it, tried to have a conversation about the World Cup. He didn't. He didn't. He just, kind of politely just went back to talk about my research. But so it's a style I'm incapable, and I'm not sure it would work with everyone, but somehow he did that. And he was also very patient with phases of unproductive. So he did have some students who were there for too long, not making progress, but he didn't kick them out, and gave a chance, believed in them. Of course, sometimes the PhD program kicks you out with the reviews, but he himself. And maybe it's the secret of numbers. If you're willing to have large groups, in large groups, maybe it's easier to get comfortable if you're willing to have, and if you manage the funding. Yes.
But it certainly sounds like Carsten Schwann had boundaries between professional discussions and personal discussions. That was one. And then just being available and patient with everyone. Those seem like two.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Returning to your timeline, so it's you finish your PhD, you go back to Brazil, and then earlier you had said you always wanted to be a professor. You're now a professor, and in 2000, as you mentioned earlier, you start applying to companies in the US, and you end up at IBM Research T.J. Watson for 12 years. How was that like, given that you always wanted to be a professor, but now you're in a research lab, which is...
So I was a professor who really liked hands-on work. So I was still coding as, after I finished my PhD, and I was advising a number of master students. For my department was a large number, but I was very hands-on. So that helped me to integrate with the group that I joined, but maybe most groups, but the group that I joined was really hands-on. We were building a new operating system. So that was really, exciting. And there was also this idea that I could always move groups. I had an offer that told me I could choose from 4 groups. It was my choice. And at any time I could also move between the groups. An interesting thing is that after they hired me, the head of research gave them an extra slot as a prize because they managed to hire a female. And they were some of them were really worried that I'll be offended by it. So like trying, so yeah, so there is this person that was hired and kind of like joking that, he's lucky that I was female, otherwise that person will not have the slot. And they were all so uncomfortable about it. And I was not. I was already having this clarity that talents come in so ways. And the challenge is that it's just because, they try to do something to recognize that it's not easy to recruit a female researcher. And it's not easy to be the single female in that group, although soon enough we had another one that was great. So 2 in 12. Or in some situations, the only female in a meeting of 80 people. So that, the recognition that for me is just like, yeah, it's special. People have different skills in order to navigate that, but they felt very uncomfortable with it. I could see this uncomfortable again. Soon enough, I was leading the IBM PhD fellowship programs. So that meant that I was coordinating the committee making choices. So what happens is that you made these choices and the committee would rank, and then you send it up. And then people get upset that the ordering that they determined for the committee changed in order to take into consideration demographics. And I tried to then educate my colleagues that when you had such a high quality pool of applicants, as we all have to all the PhD fellowships, Microsoft, Google, right? IBM. So when you have such a good pool of applicants, when you get 10, let's say, the ranking is full of biases of areas and the school prestige. This ranking doesn't make sense. So among the 10, in my view, once we do to and they're going to award 4 or 5, choosing a subset that has the additional advantage of improving the diversity in the teams so that teams can operate better is a plus for everyone. So that was, I soon was finding myself skilled in managing the discomfort that many people had at the time. I'm sure today people understand the things much better about the management, changing things determined by the technical people in order to achieve other goals, such as increasing the participation of people from underrepresented populations in the group. So in that sense, also IBM research had a very good culture of training for leadership. And from the beginning, I got a lot of opportunities in that sense. Also, anytime anyone important at IBM management, like the top 6, vice presidents or something like that in the company would come, I was randomly selected to be on the focus group every single time. And again, some people would ask me, don't you get offended? I said, well, first, if I were not doing well, they would select someone else. It's like I'm only the only female here. And actually, it is positive. So I did get a lot of opportunities, to learn and talk to other people just because as Latina and as female, I was a little different. And I enjoyed those, and I enjoyed that part too.
Did you ever worry that the amount of work that you were having to do, being a Latina and a woman, that was putting a lot of burden on you in terms of your time and commitment?
So the minority tax is hard, and I think that it's a little harder in the academia because you don't get that much out of it. I think that the visibility that you get in the company, where the visibility is good. People will think about you also when they have new initiatives. Your name will pop up a little easier. So the name recognition matters in a research lab environment, and it was improved. The name recognition was higher because you're paying this tax. I think in academia, I do worry a lot about it because we do need the input from our wonderful assistant professors, but the time, the energy they put it over there does not result in a stronger tenure or promotion package often. And more importantly, there is the power differentiation in academia is much, much stronger than in a company. At IBM or Qualcomm, I never felt I had a boss, ever. I would do what I thought was useful, ask for permission later. As long as I was not spending money, I also had a lot of leeway. When you spend money, no. But if I were, creating groups, doing things, talking to people in another part, I had a lot of leeway. When I moved to university, I was like, wow, these provost people, this dean, they are really powerful. I saw deans and provosts as more powerful than I perceived. And I think part of it may be because directors and vice presidents change a lot. Groups change a lot. In of course, academia, we can't do. It doesn't work for us. No one wants to be in a department that every 2 years you have a different department head or you have a different dean, or you don't want that. But what happens then is that there is more power. So I do think that the differentiation, the power differentiation may be that, as if I were an assistant professor and I'm talking about women, I may somehow create some situation with a full professor, and I never worried about that in the other lab. Just all these other managers had no impact on my progress. For example, it was really different. So for me, but also again is that it went well with my personality. I do prioritize talking to people, technical talk, but also other kinds of talk. So I managed to do because I wanted to.
That's a very useful distinction, that the extra burden placed on women and minorities in academia doesn't yield as much benefits as it does in industry. Is there a way of addressing that in academia? Or
I think many of us are very careful not to think, oh, it would be so nice to have a program committee co-chair for our favorite conference X who happens to be from a underrepresented population, but we resist if they are not tenured. For example, if I'm on the steering committee, I'll just try to use my loud voice as a no. You have to protect them, even for, although its program chair is prestigious. Again, that line on their resume will not be as well as a best paper award at that stage. So I think we can do that by being more selective. I learned that on the CRAWP, so the Computer Research Association has this group who has been working to widening participation. And in that group that when I joined, you could see that they always really trying to get new blood, but are they already established enough? And it's hard because it may seem like this meritocracy that keeps people away. Established enough. On the other hand, is to make sure that we do not use too many cycles from people asking them to organize events or doing things like that before they have their research brand reasonably well established.
This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Dilma da Silva, Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. Returning to your timeline, around the mid-2010s, you have spent something like a decade and a half in industry, and then you moved back to academia to become the head of the department at Texas A&M, the Computer Science and Engineering Department. Did you just grow tired of industry, or was it a new opportunity in academia that attracted you and made you make the move back?
Oh, I thought I would always at some point go back to academia because the mission resonates well with me. So I'm someone that at any given day, I did not know the value of the stock, Qualcomm or IBM at all. And I could see that my colleagues all knew. Okay. And of course I want to do better for the company, but this, overwhelming goal to make it perform better on the market, was not something driving me. Of course, we know technology helps people and things like that. But again, in terms of technology helps people, if that's what I want to do, yes, it's great to be on a place where you take it to market, but the considerations on taking to market are complex, as they should be. The company has a mandate to the board of directors and everything. It's not, companies have to go after protecting their assets. It's exactly doing the right thing. But for me, it was really hard to embrace that in the same way about getting the, this future proofing that we do when we work in academia, which is forming the next generation of researchers. Is not as much about the results we do today, although they matter, but it's also that you're training people. So I wrestled. So I was like, at some point, I'll go back to academia. But I did worry that like, oh gosh, I'll be too old to do this assistant professor thing. So I worried a little bit. I'll have to think about how I'm going to do it. It started that I started to get some people I knew and headhunters say, do you want to apply for this department head, department chair position? And then I'm thinking, who is crazy enough to hire me? I was never a faculty in the United States, and I'll go and lead the department. That can't work very well. But I kept looking at it, and when I moved to Qualcomm, I think it's worth noticing that I was in systems at IBM, and people really valued me. I wouldn't say me personally. If you really have a body of knowledge of systems and systems intersection with software, like people in my area, operating systems, distributed systems have, I was really valued in the company. Even before cloud computing, it was really valued in the company. Okay, I moved to Qualcomm Research, where they were trying to find their next big thing and to work with software. But for Qualcomm, software has been, until then, expenses. Just expenses. Oh my God, they have to maintain all these Linux distributions from Samsung and from LG and this and other. So for them, that's not where they made money off. So it was a different culture for me, that anytime I had an idea that was half-baked and IBM research, I would have someone with power to listen to me. On the other one, they wanted, because they really wanted to move to this, mobile cloud computing, edge computing, whatever it is. But what they really understood is how much value they got from information theory. I even actually studied information theory to with all this, people with PhDs in information theory all the way to the CEO. I did study in order to be able to actually talk to them better. But there was this uncomfortable thing of not being on the center of the company. So I learned a lot. On that and really loved the place. But Silicon Valley was not for me. I wanted to live there because you drive around and you're just seeing all those companies. It's super cool. But for me, when I went to Starbucks to do reviewing papers at Starbucks, everyone who came to talk to me, they thought I was a venture capitalist because I'm older, and they would try to tell me, they have a solution even for the way that I had my computer and my iPad together when I was working. And I preferred when I was in New York City, and the person who talked to me at Starbucks was often a writer, but often also a nurse, a teacher. So I love us computing, but the concentration in Silicon Valley was too high for me. So I said, I should move geographically. And that's when I decided to look at the academic positions. Very
interesting that Starbucks is an interesting litmus test of what the social circle is there.
Right. So that's also a consequence of living in small apartments. So notice here, I don't go to Starbucks to review my papers. I can vary by staying in very different parts of my house. But in New York, I lived in a very small apartment. And Mountain View, I lived in a very small apartment. So it was, okay, I have to spend 6 hours reviewing papers. I'm going to Starbucks. And that's why it matters. Right now, it does not matter to me. If I go to Starbucks, all these students is studying, I guess. But, it does not matter. Yeah, so that was an interesting litmus test. But then I always want to go to academia, and at the time, it was not clear to me if I could get a tenure track position because I was never a PI. I did lead $10 million federal government in Ireland, but the project's not mine. I cannot put on my CV. The award is to IBM. Actually, in that one, someone sold the idea, but then the execution was not working and they replaced the person with me to make that work. And I worked with the original one. I, really managed to get that going well. But I can't put on my CV. And I had a large Department of Energy grant. I could not put it on my name. So my CV had no PIs. I thought, no one is going to hire me. Now I could see they would hire me as an untenured full professor, which would be probably fine with me because, you're in industry, you don't care about the tenure or not tenured. But I didn't know that I could be hired as an associate or full professor untenured. And that, and that probably, if you can project a vision in a job talk, if you are able to say that, they'll be able to convince program managers, then I'll probably get a job. But I didn't know that, right? So you are out of academia, you have no idea how hiring works. But so I applied to, I considered positions. I started considering positions for department head, but I only applied to one. So but in 2010, I was invited to consider it. I visited and I decided to stay in industry. And then later on 2014, some colleagues that I had a lot of respect told me, "You'll be happy doing this job." Someone that I really respect her opinion. She said, "You will enjoy the department head job. It's not only bureaucracy. You enable people's success, and you help keeping upper level administration caring about faculty." And I agree with her view. So then I applied and to my surprise, they hired me, probably very scared, of my first weeks on the job. Promotion and tenure packages were due. So like the first thing I ever did was to do one promotion for full and one tenure. And I was thinking, if I were those faculty, I'll be, she'll do all wrong. Anyway, it worked well.
So in your time in Georgia Tech as a PhD student and then later as the head of the department, you've interacted with students from underrepresented groups who grew up in the U.S. Can you contrast your upbringing with theirs? And specifically, I want to ask if there are lessons that can be learned from the Brazilian system and from the environment that you grew up in that might improve the situation here in the U.S.
Yeah, so many of us who come from South America and are here, one could argue that our experience may be useful or may be relatable to Hispanic students. But that's not always the case. Many people, they did come from a lot of support and a lot of understanding on how research works. So therefore, they just were more privileged in that way. Another thing is that when you are in South America, no one may have those biases that you may not be as prepared just because you speak Spanish or Portuguese or something like that, right? It may be that they may have other reasons that you're female or you live in the wrong part of the city or something like that. It may still happen. So in that sense, it's not translatable. I think for me, I would see the translation more with the really first generation. In particular, here in Texas, there is a number where the parents are still not comfortable with English. So in that case, I think that my parents not being comfortable with the way information is conveyed, for example, not be able to handle maps, right? Before Google Maps took us, or any of those took us from one place to the other, that you really had to have maps. It was something inaccessible to my friend, my family. So in that sense, I think it is relatable. On the other hand, I think that any person who is not born here, and in particular if they have a strong accent like I do have, every now and then people make judgments about you that disappear once they know that you are an engineer or a professor or something like that. But when people don't know anything about you, they may make assumptions about what is your job, what is your social standing. And so if we, from abroad, from any country, if those uncomfortable moments, which, fortunately they're not that common, I hope, but if we can remember that we were labeled before people knew anything about us, and think that that happens to Hispanic kids today. It does happen today. It doesn't matter if the kid has parents who are medical doctors, or if the kid is a dark, is still a dreamer kid with the parents who are not citizens. It doesn't matter. They do get labeled. And I hear from many of the students here that high school counselors do not suggest they go to engineering. We have a student here who graduated with all honors you could imagine, really exceeding, but it joined Texas A&M in Kinesiola. I don't even know which was the major. It was not engineering. No one ever even told him. They got here and they had roommates in engineering. And just like, oh, this is cool, and managed to change and do super well. So I do think we can remember, all of us, in that. Some of us professors may have students who find our accent is hard to understand. It's, as a department head, Indy, I thought really interesting that on student evaluation, some students will say, Professor X has no accent. First, why they're telling me that? But actually, Professor X has a strong accent, but Professor X projects the voice, talks very loudly, clearly. And while some of us, we tend to mumble. And I would see the students commenting on accent, and really, if you are a faculty who your English is not as good as, someone who has English as a first language, if you could think about baby people judging your capability of teaching based on that, then we can kind of think that people may look at an African American graduate student and assume it comes from a minority serving institution where computer science was really weak. Just assume that and start to talk about that. And that may be true. Actually, we hope that we are getting students in our graduate programs that they didn't have the best computer science, because otherwise we have to wait until everyone has good computer science. It'll take too long. We can take smart people that are willing to work and help them to do better, but we shouldn't assume. We should assume as much as we assume from my student, that we don't know exactly where they did their undergrad. So that's, I think, can be relatable.
Sort of related to this, what is your philosophy and how do you advise students deal with rejection and also with imposter syndrome?
So rejection, we have to get used to it. And somehow it's a lifelong process, at least has been for me. You disconnect the performance indicators that we have in terms of papers accepted or grades, or this professor accept me in his or her group or not. So any of those performance indicators, and kind of disconnect from your value as a person, is a lifelong thing to do, but it is harder, I think, let's put that way. It's much easier if you already have accomplishments and people look at you and you look smart, whatever that means. So for students, when I advise them to just get used to that the more you do, the more you try, the more you fail, but you learn how to fail better. And eventually, if you are learning from the process, it's a success. And if you surround yourself about people who will help you to capitalize on your learning somehow, it will work out. But you need to be around people who will help you to identify strengths and sometimes really rephrase something and quickly adapt and change. So that's the part about failure. Imposter syndrome is the truth is that there's so much we don't know these days. Maybe it's getting easier. And if you get now curious about quantum computing and distributed computing intersection, your ignorance, I'm guessing, is similar to mine in the basics of quantum computing. But we know that if we invest, we'll be able to learn enough to make whatever that connection we are pursuing. And I think we maybe we all have these vast things we don't know, and therefore it's just the ability to learn, and that gets better. One of those things, it gets better. We know that there are, I believe, very nice commercials about that. Depending on your sexual orientation, things get better later on in life. I do think that imposter syndrome is another area that we don't just be able to address entirely now. We just capitalize on what we can and keep going. But resiliency is the key. And I tend to think that the students who get to graduate school, all of them, they have a level of resilience. It seems to be that we also have more problems with anxiety and depression, mental illness in general in our population, and therefore in the graduates. So I want us faculty to be very aware of that. But in general, students are very resilient.
You're listening to the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast interview with Dilma da Silva, Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University. You're also involved in the ACM SIGOPS CARES Committee. You're the chair of the committee, and this was formed to address issues of discrimination and harassment, policy violations in the computing community.
Right.
And there have been quite a few exposés about how prevalent harassment is in the community, especially among researchers. Tell us a little bit about what the CARES Committee is doing to address some of these.
So I think we are inspired and learning from the computer architecture community and the programming language communities, where their CARES committee, I think, has established a path that we in the operating system community are following. The maybe peculiar situation about operating systems, and because you know it's also your research area, is that we don't have that many conferences. So ACM doesn't have a large number of conference and operating systems. OSTI, Unix and SDI, it's all Usenix, right? So in our space, and others, ICDCS, whatever, they are IEEE, the ones that we have, the SOSP and EuroSys and the Asian Pacific SIS. So we don't have that many. So in terms of the conference itself, I think the conferences we all go, just a few of them are under SIGOPS. But I do think that it is important to have this channel. One part that I really think it's important, on program committees, but in particular on program committees face-to-face, where you have a lot of side conversations and things like that, to have someone whose mandate is to observe and help the program co-chairs to better handle it, even if you don't intervene right now, by talking to the program co-chairs later on, that can already help things. So that's one thing I do still see a little weird things going on in terms of biases in program committee meetings. So I think that's one. Another one is conferences. Conferences we have very well documented in all areas. There are situations in which members of our community, in particular, happens a lot if alcohol is involved, that they do become detrimental to the health of the community. So I think that it would be very hard for a junior person of a student to speak up to the program chair or conference chair. Usually are these very important people in our community about that. So we have people attending from the CARES committee that we hope to be more approachable, and it will be able to talk to the person to brainstorm about what is the better way of addressing it, because I'm not a SIGOPS officer. I'm not having any mandates to work the way that ACM has, or reporting or whatever it is. So it's about helping people then to use the right channels. Finally, all of us are probably very worried about the ethical violations that have been happening regarding reviewing in some of our communities. Therefore, also having a way that junior people can speak up about concerns about how reviewing paper decision making is happening, without having to compromise their position within the PC. So we try to make those connections. It's a work in progress, and every now when we think it doesn't happen anymore, we are all learning about something bad happening, in one of our departments, meaning, in one of our ACM or IEEE communities.
It has certainly gotten the conversation started in the operating systems, and like you mentioned, the other communities as well. And it's something that has been around for as long as human beings have been around, and I think it's great that we have brought it to the forefront. I wanted to ask you about the Latinas in Computing group as well, which you were one of the founding leaders of. Can you tell me a little bit about the group and what it does to bring more Latina students into computing?
So when we got together at a Grace Hopper celebration, 5 of us, we were from different companies at the time, but all of us, researchers with researcher positions. When we create that, was essentially to create the community. And so the initial, the immediate, impact we had is that we organized events for Latinas in computing. And a number of people start to come. Now many students and many people who work for companies. So we end up, starting, we were 5, and then the next year we were 20. Then we have those speed mentoring where we would bring very senior people to mentor them, and we were around 100. I think I managed 500 people speed mentoring once, and then I guess this became too big. We didn't do anymore, but we do have a couple of events there. Beyond that, what is happening is we are having more junior people of the community, many embedded on Silicon Valley or companies. There are organizing events where people can just talk, and also providing role models. So Latinas in Computing is one, but there are others that also came up in the spirit of being role models for following a career. In the very beginning, we had many sessions about bringing yourself to work, because some of us, not all Hispanic or Latinas at all, but some of us are very emotional, and we're having trouble in our companies or something, but because we would show emotion during a meeting. So we had tons of discussions on that. And we continue to have this, how much do you bring? There are some people that says, you leave your persona at home and just do the professional. Others think that they are much more productive and effective if they bring their whole selves. And that's a continuing conversation, and we enable that line of conversation. And I'm happy that in the beginning we're always inviting these most visible people, but I think now we are hearing from people that they just don't have that high profile position yet, but they have a lot of experience, and I think they're more inspiring to the newer generation. So I'm really happy for that.
I want to ask you a couple of questions to end the interview that go back to your story itself. The next question, my second to last question, is a bit hypothetical. After finishing your PhD, you went back to be a faculty member, and you spent a few years there, and then came to the US. The speculative question is, if you had stayed as a faculty member in Brazil, do you think your story and your career would be different, less successful, more successful, or just different from what it has been if you had stayed in Brazil the entire time?
If you manage, if we define success by visibility also, how visible you are in your community, how many times people remember to ask for your opinion, probably I will have a less successful, because what happens is that in countries still in development, the resources to go to conferences do not exist. When the economy is good, you may be able to go once every 2 years funded by the research agency. There is no other way. In some cases, I remember I had an NSF grant as I was in Brazil. There was this NSF whatever, so I did have a grant, and I have colleagues who have grants with Europe. So sometimes you can get that, but this is not the norm. So I would not have had that much opportunity. The students are very strong, but very, very strong. But the incentive to stay in graduate school, I find less, because you really need to want to go to academia. I do believe the grad school is a wonderful path for people who want to go to industry and have, very good positions, but that's not the case in Brazil. So that happens is that in my area, people who actually like to build things, it would be harder, I think, to have PhD students, graduate students. And in other sense, I would have done better, I think. Maybe I'll have had more impact as in Brazil, things change to be a little more inclusive. So there is some ways of, they open a little other doors, for example, for students from public schools, people who didn't go to private K-12 to be admitted. So I do think that maybe I'll have impact on supporting those students, because just accepting, as we all know, accepting students who are not with the background to succeed is not always easy. So I think maybe I'll have other kinds of impact, and maybe I'll be leading, research agencies in Brazil. So it'll be different. Less visibility globally, but not necessarily worse. In terms of research results, then, the richness, the opportunities that I have here, I have right now a very rich portfolio of grants. And I'm fortunate to have a grant from the Department of Transportation in autonomous vehicles. And I have, grants from the NSA on cybersecurity. And what those grants do is push me to do research that's a little not exactly already what I was doing, because they're collaborative grants. And so that kind of, technical growth, to be honest, I think will be harder to do in Brazil. I think that this collaborative grants that we pursue, in particular as you become a senior professor, that senior faculty, that's the best thing you can do from your organization, is collaborative grant. I did have the opportunity to go to Brazil if I wanted, because IBM created a research lab. That was probably 2010. In Brazil, and I could have gone to, they would be really happy to have me going to the research lab there. But I I didn't want to, then you really have to build up an organization and do a lot of administrative work in terms of work with the government, working with things to build. And that was not where I was at the time. I wanted to do more technical work. So I didn't do that.
Okay. My last question, is there anything else that we didn't cover and that you wanted to talk about?
So I do think that there is more opportunity for integration during grad school between domestic students and students coming from abroad. And I would encourage both groups to really pursue that. It's a wonderful opportunity for networking. I know that some of us advisors give the students the impression that you have to be in the lab working your thesis, coding, reading papers all day. I do think that you can do that very well and still try to have coffee breaks with the people that you attend seminars with, when you take classes, doing groups and being curious about other people. I think we grow as human beings, but I actually believe it's really good growth for the career. So for the many students who end up going to industry, the more people you met in your grad school, once you want to check it out, what is a job in another company, you have someone to talk in a more personal level than going on LinkedIn and liking, trying to find every graduates from UIC or Texas A&M and see, they graduated more or less my time. Let me send a LinkedIn message. When we are from abroad, it's hard to understand certain things related to diversity. So ask. Right? Ask. I have been mentoring in some graduate students that were on the job market, and they will go to the Zoom interview. And one told me, I was asked about diversity. I never thought about it. So I would think that any graduate student from another country who doesn't understand, what is all this conversation, and why am I feeling resentful? Because I think the females will get the travel grants to the conference. It's okay. You're feeling resentful. Talk to someone you trust about it and learn about, what is it that all of us, including you, are trying to do. So that's the last thing I want to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dilma, for being so open and willing to share your story with us. And in possibly the only word that I know in Brazilian Portuguese, obrigado.
Oh, that's great.
On today's episode of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast, you have heard the immigration story of Dilma da Silva, Professor of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M University, former head of department, former researcher at IBM Research, and formerly a Brazil professor. Coming up in the next episode, Rodrigo Fonseca talks about first not choosing computer science as his first degree, find out how and what changed his mind, and hear how he's always been torn between industry and academia. That's coming up in the next episode. If you haven't already done so, please listen to the lead episode of this Brazil segment, that's episode 5, featuring all the 3 narrators from Brazil. All the music used in episodes of the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast is royalty-free. All voice recordings were performed with and are reproduced with full consent of narrators and participants. You can find music credits on our website. Join the online discussion about this podcast on all major social media, including Twitter and Facebook, with the handle CSImmigrant and hashtag CSImmigrant. And of course, the episode guide is available at our website, csimmigrant.org. This is the Immigrant Computer Scientists podcast.